Hey everybody, today I want to talk about deployment strategies and the differences in deployment for Warhammer 40k 8th edition that's been different than we've seen in 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th edition. So it could be something that new players, people that have only been playing for a couple of editions, have never experienced. We're going to do kind of rundowns on some of the more specific and critical things in these short videos. If you want to see more analysis, listen to the longer videos that we have. That's the podcast we do. Please like, share, subscribe, and comment. I really want to hear you guys' opinion on the changes for Warhammer 40k 8th edition. So here in the rulebook, we've got in addition to a bunch of different deployment zones, the method for determining deployment is different. The players roll off, the person that chooses or wins the roll gets to pick the map and their deployment zone. The other player gets the other deployment zone, obviously, and then starting with the player who did not get to pick their deployment zone, they start alternating placing units. This is big because most of these missions, they have something here that says the player who finished setting up their army first can choose to take the first or second turn. And then their opponent can then get to seize the initiative, and that's something that we've had for the last couple of editions. But I want that to sink in. The opponent the player who finishes deploying their army first gets to choose who goes first or second. And remember that you have to start with half of your army on the table. So depending on how you've built your army, how you've loaded out some independent characters, you may be disadvantaged even though you may not have that optimized army. So I kind of want to talk about some of the things how that plays into what I think may be something you can do even before the game starts to see about getting an advantage in this section. Now, first thing I want to talk about is transports. Transports are getting kind of a bad rap right now in 8th edition online, largely because of their point increases. But I'm not going to talk about them getting a bunch of wounds and how they can do assault, things they couldn't do before, any of those things. I'm not going to talk about that part. What I'm going to talk about now specifically relates to deployment. Remember that you can pile in as many units as that can fit into a transport. You've got one Rhino, you could have 2 5-man squads in it. You've got a Razorback, you could have a 5-man squad and an independent character in there. I know that there are some risks with being inside a vehicle when it is destroyed. So I'm not telling you necessarily how to optimize that or how to run that risk, but I'm telling you that during deployment, you're able to kind of win the race to see who deploys first by utilizing transports. And then I assume that includes going to be anything like drop pods, anything with a capacity to hold figures, to hold units inside, a Storm Raven that can hold a Dreadnought, things like that. You're going to be able to kind of, again, win that deployment race to see about getting the first turn. Now, again, they can seize the initiative on you, and I haven't found anything that helps with that yet. But it's still something to talk about because deployment radically changed. First turn could radically change things. I want to also point out now there are no limitations on charging. There were some things you could not do first turn before without either special rules or something else, such as bringing in units, charging, and that kind of stuff, but that is no longer the case. And for transport specifically, when you set up a transport, units can start the battle embarked within it instead of being set up separately. So with that one placement, you're then going to be able to put multiple things on the table, again, to all craft how you craft it to get ready for that hopefully winning first turn. So this may not be something that wins the game for you, but I think it's a consideration that people are going to have as we start to really get our hands on 8th edition. I'm starting to think about maybe I put scouts in a Razorback with a priest or something for Blood Angels. Things like Wave Serpents that can hold many troops. Maybe you put several in there. It's just stuff that's all going to lead towards approaching the game differently because of 8th edition. And that's what I think we really need to take away from. And so now I want to talk about the deployment types for units that have traditionally been a little bit different. Things like Striking Scorpions here, it says during deployment you can send them up in the shadows. So they're not on the table, they're in the shadows. And then you can bring them on at the end of any of your movement phases, but they have to be more than 9 inches away from an enemy model. Now, the reason I say model in the way that I do it, because that's very important. Other things, like scouts, their rule says that you deploy them within 9 inches of the enemy deployment zone. So that's kind of a little different between the scout and infiltrate. It's not the way we knew it before. It behaves differently, but can still give you some either advantages or some tricks or what have you. Scouts, as you know, they can get things like sniper rifles that can pick out independent characters. So you probably don't ever want to utilize being able to set up within 9 inches of a deployment zone, but of course it depends on the mission. But that's a little bit differently from how the scout mechanic works now, because when you're alternating units, you don't know where the enemy is going to be within their deployment zone if they're all going to set up within there. So instead of making that awkward, they've given them a limitation of setting out within 9 inches away from the deployment zone. There's going to be other things like the deep strike that was covered on the Warhammer community site that, as you come in between or outside of 9 inches away from enemy models. And that's how they're playing with it. There's going to be enemy model exclusions and deployment zone exclusions for this deployment setup. But it's really a change that I think we're going to have to process and get our minds around. And if I can speak one more second about the transports, I think that may even factor into where we see that their points are going to be increased. Again, we know that a drop pod is going to be more points than it was before. A Rhino that people didn't traditionally pay for anyway is going to be more points, but it also has more utility, more versatility, can even factor in the strategy of winning the game for you. It's not just a defense, not just a one-turn defense against shooting anymore. These things are going to have a big play in every phase of the game, and I think that's important to take away here, because in the subject of deployment, it's going to be one of the ways that you can help win the race to see if you can go first, and maybe that's important to you. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts. We'll talk again soon. Thanks, guys.